Right, so today I wanted to make a video about unbiased news. I know everybody nowadays seems to talk about how biased news is on both sides, and everybody seems to talk about how they want to and or they're getting a unbiased form of news when they're getting their news. And in reality, the overwhelming majority of people aren't, and they don't. Most of the time, they don't realize it. And when you point it out, usually they'll deny it. And where this stems from is basically starting right from when you're very little in public school. But this was just an article, by the way, about some unbiased news sites that I was just looking at. I don't really, not even sure if I agree with it, but it's just something I had pulled up. But getting back to it, people think that they're not. People want to get, and they think that they're not getting an unbiased form of news, but in reality, they've never been taught, and they've spent probably the first 20 to 25 years of their life not getting a fair source of news. And the reason for that is public school is more of a left-wing institution, right? It's pretty much the same thing as government-funded healthcare, but from a school function, basically. The level of education isn't as good. The teachers don't have as much of an incentive to be really good as opposed to a private school or a homeschool setting. So, not to mention they're funded through taxation, which is a leftist concept that we're going to force people to pay money to fund our things. The more traditional conservative or right wing position would be is that people voluntarily pay or they go to private school or whatnot. So and college is even worse yet because the teachers they're unionized. I mean, that's the other thing too, is that teachers are generally unionized even in public school, but in colleges and stuff, they're funded through tuition, which is the government basically enforces the price of tuition by they artificially inflate the price of tuition by saying that we'll guarantee that anyone can go, basically, as long as you can get in, right? Because if you take a student loan, they'll give you the money. So basically, they're guaranteeing anyone will go. Long story short, public school and colleges nowadays are about the furthest thing from a free market way of doing schooling as you can possibly get, aside from in like a communist system. But we're honestly not really that far away from a communist system. So people have spent the first 20 to 25 years, maybe even more, of their life in a system where everybody running those systems has a very large incentive based on the fact that their job is reliant on the fact that this system continues. So people have spent, in essence, the easiest way of summing it up and putting it down, the first 20 to 25 years of their life, on average, in a system that is completely biased to one direction, and yet most of the time they don't even realize it. Like, how many people do you hear talking about that? Well, hardly any. So you've never really been taught how to get an unbiased view of things, and you've done it for so long, like the current way you're doing it, that it's a learned habit that it's pretty hard to notice and break, and you've usually spent so much time invested in it that you're never going to change. So that's that. The other thing to get onto would be the mainstream media. No alternative media outlets other than like your Young Turks and like some of the bigger left-wing ones, Vox. None of them are funded by the government or by the tech companies. I know YouTube's given money to Vox and the Young Turks, but not only do they not give money to the right-wing ones, they generally censor pretty much every one of them, and they censor some of them basically out of existence to where they either can't afford to continue or they just don't allow them on their platforms. So if you really want to get an unbiased view of things nowadays, you really have to go out of your way to get the right wing position, to get their views on things. But all you have to do to get the left wings is you just watch TV, you you see the news on your social media, all that stuff. Like, you basically don't even have to try, I guess is the best way to put it. But to get the right wing news, especially the ones that they would call more like fringe or far right, even though most of them aren't. In fact, almost every one of them isn't. You really have to go out of your way. You need to. I mean, they don't even give you notifications. Usually, you're gonna have to go right into people's channels and see. So it's a lot harder. The other thing too is that whenever you're talking about news with people, and this is just not for your personal experience, this is more when you're in a group. Even if you're with people who are more or who aren't really far to one side, I mean, no matter what, the news topic is almost always started with the assumption from the left wing position. For example, Trump. It's maybe not as much now because it's been completely disproven, but whenever the Trump was brought up, it's always from a position that he's bad, that everything he's doing is horrible, even though if you look at the numbers, he's clearly doing better than the last at least 2 or 3 presidents. So the other thing too would be the Trump-Russia collusion stuff, and that the first thing that's brought up whenever you talk with a member of the public, or the average, probably 80-90% of the people, is that, oh yeah, he's guilty, he definitely did it. But in reality, he didn't. But whenever the conversation is brought up, we're starting from the position that the guy on the right, or the right wing position, is the worst one, is the guilty one, and the one on the left is the better one, the superior one, all that stuff. So what I wanted to basically drive home is that if you want to get an unbiased form of news nowadays, you really have to go out of your way to do that. And the problem is most people don't want to do that. It's harder, it takes more time, it's even riskier if you're watching it with people that they hear you and they think you're crazy because you're wanting to get a different perspective. You might not even agree with it. So that's kind of what I wanted to say. So another thing too I wanted to bring up is that you can generally tell if someone knows what they're talking about when they're talking about a topic like this. If they tell you that, oh yeah, you need to do an equal job, or you need to equal effort in looking into both sides. Anybody who tells you that is they're insane, because like I said, it's probably tens of times easier to get the left wing point of view in news and compared to the right wing. And it maybe not as much the neoconservative view, but if you want to get a libertarian, anarchist, free market or true free market view, you really, really have to try hard. And all you have to do to get the socialist, the leftist view is literally just, you don't even have to try, like I said. So anybody who tells you that, yeah, you need to do an equal amount of time doing both, it's crazy. Like it just shows how ignorant they are on the difference in the news nowadays. So that's about all I wanted to get to as far as that goes. The other thing too to mention quickly would be as more evidence, I guess, of my position on this is that the left, I made a video about this, I'm sure most people are aware of this, is that the left has gone way further to the left in the last roughly 20 years, and the right has only gone slightly more to the right. So if you're getting like let's say a moderate leftist news source of 20 years ago, they're now more of a moderate conservative, at least on the spectrum, form of news nowadays. And a moderate leftist news source nowadays would be a far left news source, or maybe close to a far left, maybe not completely far left, news source of 20 years ago. So anybody who's like, in their 40s, 50s, 60s, they probably don't even realize this fact. And it's just a lot of, the news watchers or the older people. So that's just one more reason to bring up, just to kind of prove my point. Anyways, if you liked the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.